Well, good morning. Good morning and Shabbat Shalom. It is a privilege once again to welcome Rabbi Hillel Silverman and to learn his wisdom about this week's Torah portion. Good morning. Good Shabbos, Hillel. How are you?
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
Nice to be
Shalom.
here.
So this morning is Miketz, the whole drama of Joseph. Take us away. Tell us what to look for.
Actually, this is the second parsha about Joseph. There are four of them, and it's probably the longest narrative of any of our avot in the Bible. If you remember last Saturday, we had Joseph come to Egypt. He avoided the advances of Potiphar's wife last week and ended up in prison. After 2 years, he interpreted the dreams of the butler and of the baker. And this morning, at the beginning of the Sedra of the Parsha, we have other dreams. Pharaoh has two dreams, the dreams of the cattle and the dreams of the sheaves of wheat. And the cattle are well fed and robust. After 7 years, they are swallowed by the thin, emaciated cattle. And then this happens also with the wheat. You have wheat that are very healthy, and they are eaten up by emancipated wheat. Pharaoh wants to know what his dreams are all about. He inquires of his necromancers. They can't answer. And then the butler remembers that in prison 2 years before, there had been a Hebrew named Joseph who interpreted his dreams. And he had thought that Pharaoh should ask Joseph to come to the palace and interpret Joseph's dreams, which Joseph does. And obviously, the 7 cows and the 7 sheaves of wheat represent 7 good years, well-fed cattle. But after 7 years, the imaginary cattle come and devour the good-looking cattle, and there will be 7 bad years of famine and 7 years of famine. And so you remember the story. Pharaoh appoints Moses as second in his kingdom, and he should store the grain during the 7 good years and then provide and sell the grain to the Egyptians during the 7 years of famine. Story continues. The brothers come to buy grain, and they are taken by Pharaoh to the kingdom of Egypt. Pharaoh, of course, accuses them of being spies. They have come to spy the land, and they say, no, we are Canaan, we are upright people, and where do you live? And he told them, in Canaan. Our father is old, and I have a little brother, Benjamin, who is too young to come. It would break my father's heart to have him come and not return, just as his brother is missing. We can't have another brother missing. And so Pharaoh tells Joseph that he should bring the little brother back if they would like to come a second time and buy grain. So they come to Egypt a second time in tomorrow morning's Torah reading. They eat with Joseph, and then comes the episode of the goblet. It's not just a wine cup, it's a symbol of divination. He uses the goblet for divination purposes, and the goblet is placed in the knapsack of Benjamin. Each of the other brothers' knapsacks are searched, and the goblet is found in Benjamin's knapsack. And so they bring him back to the palace, and that's the way our Seder ends tomorrow morning. There's some interesting passages. One of them is when the brothers come to the father and say to him, we would like to go to Egypt and buy grain. And the Bible says, Jacob rebukes him, Lama titra'u, why do you look at each other? And the rabbis interpret, look each other means, why do you look down upon your brothers? Why do you quarrel? You need to be humble. You need to be modest. And so peace and tranquility will come from peace and quiet. Strife and contemplation only cause ego enhancement and arrogance and the seeking of preference. So that is what happens with the brothers. They go down to Egypt to buy grain with the approval of their father. And the first time they come, Joseph is angry. He's angry and puts all of them in prison. He says, "You are all spies. You have come to spy out the land." And in the prison, he overhears them saying that they are guilty, that they were pleading with each other to save their brother Joseph. And when Joseph overheard, he wept. He couldn't contain himself, and he ran out of the prison and broke down. Still, he didn't have a reunion with his brothers. Now, it's not easy to admit the fact that you have transgressed and sinned. It's not easy to make amends, but this is what the brothers did. They come a second time, and Joseph says to them, "Is that old man your father still well?" And then you'll find next week when they reunite that he says that again, but this time he says, "Ha'od avi chayai," is my father still alive? He hasn't seen his father for 10 or more years, and he wants to know if his own father is alive because he misses him terribly. They've been separated for 20 years, for 10 years or more, and he would like to have a reconciliation with his father. They hadn't been with each other. Now, today, we find the same problem of separation of families, of parents and children. Many of us live far apart from each other, and we cannot see each other as often as we would like to. I remember a long time ago, 1929, my parents were great Zionists, and they wanted to make their first trip. There was no Israel then. They wanted to go to Palestine, which they did. I was 5 years old. My brother was 4. And they left us with a nurse. I still remember her name, Mrs. Faust. And we were really concerned. I remember that. We were concerned that our parents would never come back. And when my mother returned with my father, I didn't recognize her. And she said, "I am your mother." We got over that after a week, but I'll never forget when we were left alone by our mother and father. After I graduated from the seminary and after I served in the Navy, I went to Dallas for 10 years, my first congregation, and I went to Los Angeles Sinai Temple for 15 years, my second congregation. That's 25 years where I was separated from my mother and father who lived in Connecticut, thousands of miles away. And it wasn't easy. It was difficult. Well, you say when you're apart from your dear ones, and this is the case now in the United States, many families are separated this way and are unable to spend a quality time together with each other. I remember my parents visited us in Dallas and Los Angeles every year for a month. And of course, I called them on the telephone, and it was not easy. I remember every time I took them to the airport, when they left, I would look at the airplane flying into the air, and I said to myself, will I ever see my mother and father again? This reminds me of the brother of Yoda. Ha'od Avichai is my father still away, is still living. It occurs to me with the pandemic these days, and it's been now almost a year, that we cannot visit dear ones who may be in a senior home or a house of assistance. And I'm sure that our dear ones feel abandoned. Why aren't we visiting them? Why can't we not see them? We're not concerned with them. It's very, very difficult these days. It's difficult to say last words of goodbye to our dear ones when they pass away. Can you imagine a mother or father not even saying a goodbye to her children because they're in a home which doesn't allow visitors? Well, let's look at some of the other aspects of our Sedra tomorrow, this morning. It reads like a novel, really. You have characters that are unforgettable, that are very, very real. You have Jacob, who has been separated from his son Esau for 20 years. You have a mother favoring a son and a father, himself favoring the other son. You have Laban deceiving him with his marriage to Rachel. Then you have the brothers who were very envious and jealous. You can see them, who were furious at their brother Joseph's favoritism, and then later relived the past. And we come to the goblet, where Benjamin is accused of a boglet, and Joseph. Joseph is very real. He was thrown in a pit. He remembers that. And his brothers plotted against him. And Potiphar's wife accused him, and he went to prison. All of these characters are very real in a very, very real novel, which has a great plot. It has suspense. It has characterization. And when we read this novel, we say to ourselves, well, now who really was blamed for this tragedy? And it was a tragedy, the breakup of a family, a son not seeing his father for many, many years, and brothers being envious and jealous. Who is to blame for this? Well, obviously, Jacob, in one way, was to blame. He made his son a favorite. He got him a coat of many, many colors. And he repeated the dreams that Joseph had to his brothers, infuriating him. So he was to blame, Jacob. But then again, his brothers must share the blame, for they were envious, they were jealous, they were hateful, and did many, many evil things to the brother Joseph. And Joseph himself was partially to blame. He had that coat of many colors, and he probably flaunted that garment to his brothers. He reported on their doings. He repeated 2 dreams that he had, and then repeated the dreams to make them more angry. So who then is to blame? The brothers, Joseph, or Jacob? I have a feeling that the blame must be shared by all 3. It takes 2 to tangle, really 3 to tangle in this case, till they reconciled. There was a terrible, terrible feeling of guilt among them. And that's it today too, in our problems, in our family, in our problems with business, in our problems with the community, in our problem with organizations. Oftentimes we cannot put the blame on one person, but the blame belongs on us, on ourselves, and on others. And we can learn from this tragedy of Joseph. And it seems to me that the value judgment of teshuvah is so important. We must make a teshuvah. We must make amends for our transgressions. And that's the teaching of Yom Kippur. The rabbis ask, how do we know on the Day of Atonement that we are forgiven? The answer by the rabbis is, if the same conditions face you that cause you to sin, and you're able to succumb and not sin again, then you know that God has forgiven you. Amen. Shabbat Shalom.
Well, Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi. It's wonderful to learn with you again, and hope that you're doing very, very, very well. And thank you for sharing your Torah with us, and thank you for sharing your wonderful experiences, the experiences of your family, and wish you a very, very good Shabbos. And to everyone who's listening, thank you for sharing this morning with us, this afternoon with us, and wish you a very, very good Shabbos. Havdalah tonight at 6 o'clock, and we begin the new week. Minyan tomorrow morning at 8:30, and every day this week at 7:30 at 5 o'clock in the evening. Thank you for being with us, and Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi. Shabbat Shalom.